That little metal stake you push straight down into the ground is the reason your tent came apart at 2 in the morning. Not the wind, the stake. You can buy a tent today with taped seams and shock-corded poles and a wind rating printed right on the box. At least, that's what the box says. 10 mistakes are about to beat that tent, and the old shelters that stood on this land solved every one of them without a scrap of nylon. There's one mistake underneath all 10. See if you catch it before I name it. Number 1. The stake goes in the wrong direction. Watch what most folks do at a campground on a Friday evening. They hook the loop over the stake. They stand on the stake. They drive it straight down into the dirt like a nail, and they walk away. Sometimes they even lean it toward the tent because that feels like it's holding on tighter. It isn't. Think about which way the load actually pulls. A guy line never pulls sideways. It pulls up and out, away from the tent, at whatever angle that line is running. A stake standing straight up has nothing behind it, so that pull works it back and forth in its own hole until the hole is bigger than the stake, and out it comes. Lean it toward the tent, and you've made it worse, because now the pull is levering it out on purpose. So, drive it the other way, roughly 45 degrees, with the top of the stake leaning away from the tent. Say it out loud when you're doing it. Top away from the tent. Now that same pull is trying to drag the stake deeper into the soil instead of prying it up, and the ground itself is doing the holding. Then run the guy line in a straight line out from the seam it's attached to and put tension on it. Not a lazy loop, tension. Guy out every line the tent came with. On a still night too, because you're never awake when the wind arrives, and the ground decides the rest. In good soil, that angled stake is all you need. In loose sand or dry duff, a stake has nothing to grip, so you bury one instead. Lay it flat in a trench about a foot down. Tie the line around its middle. Fill the trench and pack it. That's a dead man anchor, and it will hold long after a driven stake has pulled. On rock where nothing goes in at all, you run the line to a boulder, or you build a pile of stone on top of the line and it holds fine. Same idea every time. If you can't drive it, weigh it. Now that's the fix. The older answer is bigger than the fix. Look at how the Plains Lodge was pitched. The State Historical Society of North Dakota describes that shape plainly. The base was oval rather than round. The cone was tilted, and as the wind moved over it, the wind pushed the structure down into the ground and helped hold it there. The Buffalo Bill Center of the West describes the same thing from the other side. The cone was longer in front and steeper in back, and the doorway faced east, toward the morning sun and away from the prevailing wind. Nobody was fighting the weather. They aimed the shelter so the weather worked for them, and then they staked it down all the way around. Your tent is symmetrical, and you pointed the door at the lake because the lake looks nice. That's the whole difference, and it cost you nothing to fix. Now, everything I'm walking you through today used to get handed down at a fire and never written anywhere, which is exactly why it went missing. It's written down now. It's a book called The Native American Way, 101 Remedies, Skills, and Recipes that kept my people alive for 10,000 years. It's for the person who wants the old answers set out plain, step by step, so you can actually do them. The shelter and fire and water skills, the wild foods, the remedies, the traditional cooking, all in one place. Think about what one wall of a sporting goods store costs you and how much of it ends up in the garage. Now go ahead and grab your phone and open up your camera, the same one you use to take pictures. Point it at that square code on your screen and hold it steady for a second. A little link will pop up, give it a tap, and it will take you straight to the book. And if you are watching on your phone right now, The link is waiting for you right down below in the description. Take your time, there is no rush at all. I'll wait right here. All right, so here's where it starts getting expensive because the next one gets decided before you ever take the tent out of the bag. Number 2, you pick the campsite with your eyes instead of your head. Everybody does it. You come around a bend, there's flat ground. There's a pretty little creek running past it. There's a nice open patch under the trees, and you say that's the spot. Flat, soft, close to water, out of the sun. 4 good reasons, and every single one of them is a reason to keep walking. Here's what flat and low means on a hillside. It means water has been running through there for a long time, and it will run through there again. The National Weather Service puts it about as plain as it can be put. A dry stream bed can turn into a raging torrent in minutes with no rain in sight where you're standing because the rain fell 6 miles up the drainage. And most flash flood deaths happen at night, which is the one time you are not watching the sky. You do not have to be in the desert for this. Any place water has cut a channel, water is coming back. That soft, flat ground has a second problem too. Cold air is heavy. It slides downhill all night and pools in the low spot. So the prettiest campsite in the valley is usually the coldest one. And a bench a little way up the slope will run warmer all night. Then look straight up before you unroll anything. Dead limbs hanging in the canopy come down on still nights for no reason at all. Old-timers called them widowmakers, and they earned the name. If there's a dead branch or a leaning dead tree over your spot, that's not your spot. So what you actually want is boring. Slightly high ground, a bench or a shoulder rather than the bottom of the bowl, ground that sheds water instead of catching it, live timber, overhead or nothing overhead, water close enough to walk to, and far enough that it can rise without reaching you, and the door of that tent aimed the way the plains lodges were aimed, with the back and the steepest wall into the weather. That's the site. Now let's talk about what you're going to be lying on, because this is the one that ruins more trips than weather ever does. Number 3, you put all your insulation on the wrong side of your body. Most people spend real money on a sleeping bag and almost nothing on what goes under it, and then they lie there at 4 in the morning wondering why their back is freezing while their chest is sweating. Here's the mechanism, because it's obvious the second somebody says it out loud. A sleeping bag doesn't hold heat. Air holds heat, and the bag just holds the air still. That's all loft is, trapped air. Now put your whole body weight down on the bottom half of that bag. The fill crushes flat, the air is gone, and the insulation under you has stopped working entirely. Meanwhile, the ground is in direct contact with you all night, pulling heat straight out by conduction, which is a whole lot faster than losing it to still air. So the only thing standing between you and that ground is the pad. That pad is the working half of your sleep system, and the comfort is a bonus it happens to throw in. The number you want is the R value, and since 2020, there's finally a standard behind it, the ASTM F3340 test. They put the pad between a warm plate on top, roughly body temperature, and a cold plate underneath, and they measure how much energy it takes to keep the top plate steady. That's it. That's the number. Which means an R value from one brand now actually compares to an R value from another. The rough guide the pad makers publish alongside that standard runs about 1 to 2 for summer, 3 to 4 for 3 seasons, and 5 and up for winter and snow. And they stack foam pad under an air pad, and you add the two numbers together. Now, the older answer needed no numbers because it was built out of whatever was standing nearby. Grass, dry leaves, evergreen boughs laid tips down and shingled hides and robes on top of that, a thick bed made of dead air, built fresh at every camp, thrown out when they moved. Same principle exactly. Get separation between your body and the earth, and make that separation out of trapped air. If you take one thing off this list, take that one. But this next mistake is the reason you can spend a whole evening turning yourself around a fire and still get in the bags cold, so stay with me. Number 4, you're building a bonfire when you wanted a heater. A big round fire in the middle of the clearing feels like the point of camping, and it is a fine thing to look at. As a heat source, it's close to useless. Radiant heat leaves that fire in every direction at once. So you're warming the trees and the dark, and the side of you facing away from it is going cold anyway. You end up turning yourself like a hog on a spit all evening. The fix costs nothing but 10 minutes of work. Build a reflector behind the fire. A stack of green logs against 2 driven stakes, a slab of rock, a low earth bank, a big deadfall, anything solid that stands 3 or 4 feet high. Then put the fire between the reflector and you, close in and keep it small. Now the heat that was going out the back comes back at you, and instead of a bonfire, you're standing inside a pocket of warmth. That's how you heat a lean-to or an open shelter all night on an armload of wood instead of half a tree. There's an older version of this for sleeping out, and it's worth knowing. Instead of a round fire, you build a long one, 2 big logs laid side by side with a few inches between them, coals raked down into the gap, and the fire runs the length of your body instead of sitting in a spot. You lie parallel to it with the reflector on the far side. Now you're not warming one hip at a time, you're getting even heat down your whole length, and 2 heavy logs will hold coals for hours without anybody feeding them. That's a fire built by people who intended to sleep through the night on it. While you're at it, size the fire for the job. A cooking fire the size of a dinner plate will cook everything you brought. Clear the ground around it down to bare mineral soil, 5 feet in every direction, and get the overhanging branches out of the picture before you strike a match. And check whether you're even allowed to have one, because fire restrictions change week to week, and the local ranger district posts the current rules. Small fire, solid back wall, sit close. That's it. And if you're keeping count, that's 4 fixes now, and not one of them came out of a catalog. Hold on to that because it's going somewhere. And that brings me to number 5, which is the one I would fix tonight if I could only fix one, because this mistake has actually killed people. Number 5, you sealed the shelter shut to keep the heat in. It's the most natural thing in the world. It's cold. So you zip the door, you close the vents, you shut every flap you can find, and you get in the bag. Then somewhere around 3 in the morning you wake up and the inside of that tent is running with water. The foot of your bag is damp, and you are colder than you were when you got in. That water came out of you. A sleeping person gives off a surprising amount of moisture, just breathing, and more than that if you went to bed sweating. In a sealed tent, it has nowhere to go, so it hits the coldest surface it can find, which is the fabric 2 feet from your face, and it condenses there and rains back down. Then it soaks into your loft, the loft flattens, the insulation quits, and now you're wet and cold in a shelter that's technically working perfectly. That's the annoying half. Here's the half that isn't annoying. Anytime you bring a flame into a closed shelter, a little stove, a lantern, a heater, a pan of coals somebody carried in to take the chill off, you're making carbon monoxide in a box with a sleeping person in it. The Consumer Product Safety Commission says that since 2020, it knows of at least 12 people who died of carbon monoxide poisoning connected to camping equipment, and that's grills, lanterns, and stoves. 12 people. It has no smell and no color, Cracking a window does not fix it, and the symptoms are drowsiness and confusion, which in a sleeping bag at midnight feel exactly like falling asleep. There's no version of this that's worth the risk. No flame inside a closed shelter, ever. And that includes coals you think are done. So how did people sleep inside a shelter with a live fire in the middle of it all winter and wake up dry? By building the shelter as a chimney on purpose. Look at how the Plains Lodge was actually put together, because this is engineering and it deserves that word. There's an inner liner called an ozone or a dew cloth, and the State Historical Society of North Dakota describes exactly what it does. It hangs from about 6 feet up all the way around the inside, and it does not touch the outer cover. There's a gap behind it. Cold air comes in under the outer cover at ground level, gets caught behind that liner, and runs straight up the gap instead of across the floor. That's a chimney effect built out of a sheet of hide. It pulls the fire's smoke up with it and out the top. It keeps the draft off the people sleeping, and the condensation that would have run down onto your bed runs down the back of the liner instead, behind you, where you never feel it. Then at the top, there are the smoke flaps. The Buffalo Bill Center of the West describes them as ear-like flaps on either side of the smoke hole, adjustable, worked with 2 outside poles. You swing them with the wind, so the opening always sits downwind and the draft always pulls up and out instead of back down into the room. When the weather turned, somebody stepped outside and reset them, the same way you'd adjust a damper. Read that back and you'll see what they did. They took the exact problem you're having, smoke and heat and moisture in an enclosed space, and instead of sealing it, they moved air through it in a controlled path. That is why a hide lodge with a live fire in it stayed dry inside through a Plains winter, while your sealed nylon tent is running with water on a mild night in October. For you tonight, the lesson is short, and it will feel wrong. Open the vents, crack the top vent, and the low vent both, so air comes in low and leaves high, and let the shelter breathe even when it's cold. You will lose a couple of degrees of air temperature, and you will wake up dry, and dry is what keeps you warm. Now, that one's about the air around you. This next one is about what you're wearing in it, and there's a fabric in your closet right now that has no business in a cold camp. Number 6, you're wearing cotton, and you're wearing one big coat, 2 mistakes that travel together. Blue jeans, a cotton t-shirt, and one heavy parka over the top of it, which is exactly how most of us were raised to dress for cold weather. Cotton is the problem child. Dry, it's fine. Wet, it holds water against your skin, and it stops insulating almost completely, and it stays wet for hours because it will not shed moisture. And you don't need to fall in a creek for this. Sweat does it. You hike into the site with a pack on. You work up a good sweat under that parka. You stop moving, and now you're standing still in wet clothes in the evening air. Here's why that matters more than people think. The Forest Service says most hypothermia cases develop in air temperatures between 30 and 50 degrees, and it adds the part that ought to be on a poster, which is that most people simply can't believe such temperatures are dangerous. 30 to 50, that's a nice fall afternoon. That's every deer camp and every soccer tournament you've ever stood at. It isn't the cold that gets people at those temperatures. It's being wet at those temperatures. The Park Service tells visitors to Glacier the same thing in one line. Avoid cotton layers like t-shirts and blue jeans. Carry a rain layer and a wool hat. The one big coat has its own flaw. It has one setting. You're either roasting in it or you've taken it off, and you sweat through the middle setting on your way to finding out. Layers give you a dial, a wicking layer against the skin, wool, or synthetic. An insulating layer over that, fleece or wool. A shell over that to block wind and water. Then you shed a layer before you start sweating, not after. That's the whole trick. And almost nobody does it, because shedding a layer while you're still comfortable feels like a mistake. And keep one set of dry clothes and one pair of dry socks sealed in a bag that never comes out except to sleep in. Not the ones you hiked in. The old lodges kept the same discipline in a different form. Spare moccasins and wraps kept back and dry because the people who lived out there year-round understood something the rest of us have to learn twice, which is that wet clothing will take you down at temperatures that never once felt threatening. And if somebody in your camp is shivering hard, slurring words, or fumbling their hands, that's not somebody who needs to tough it out. That's somebody who needs to get warm and dry and get help. Which brings us to the sneakiest one on the list, because this one doesn't hurt you at camp. It waits about a week. Number 7. You drank from the pretty water. Cold, clear, running fast over stones, high in the mountains with nobody above you for miles. Every instinct you have says that water is clean. The Forest Service's own Giardia notice says the quiet part out loud, that water can look, smell, and taste perfectly clean and still be carrying cysts, because a beaver or a muskrat upstream is all it takes, and one infected animal can shed hundreds of millions of them. What you get is giardiasis, and it will not kill you. It will just take a couple of weeks of your life away, a week or two after you get home, long after you've stopped connecting it to the trip. Cramps, diarrhea, gas, no appetite, worn out. And the incubation delay is exactly why so many people still believe the pretty water is safe. They never link the two. So, treat everything. Here's a standard straight from the CDC, and I'd repeat these numbers to yourself. Bring clear water to a rolling boil for 1 minute. Above 6,500 feet. Boil it 3 minutes. 1 minute low, 3 minutes high. A rolling boil is a real boil, jumping, not the first few bubbles on the bottom of the pot. And boiling handles all of it, viruses, bacteria, and parasites both. If you're filtering instead, know what your filter actually does. Most portable filters take out parasites like Giardia and Cryptosporidium and do not take out viruses. The pore size matters, and cloudy water needs to settle out or get pre-filtered first, or you'll blind the element in an afternoon. Chemical drops work, but they need contact time. And the label tells you how long, and cold water needs longer. Read the label instead of guessing. Guidance on this gets updated, so check the current CDC recommendations before your trip, rather than trusting what somebody told you at a campfire in 1986. And the old answer here is the same answer, which I find satisfying. Water got boiled. It got boiled in a bark vessel or a hide-lined pit with hot stones dropped in, which sounds primitive right up until you realize it produces exactly what the CDC is asking you for. Rolling boil. The same standard. Arrived at a very long time before anybody wrote it down, and no metal pot required. Now that one you can't see coming. This next one you absolutely can, and it's the one that gets a bear killed. Number 8. You cooked, ate, and slept in the same 20 feet. The truck's right there, the table's right there, so the stove goes on the table, the cooler stays by the tent, and the wrappers go in a grocery sack tied to the mirror. Perfectly normal, and it turns your campsite into a scent cone pointing straight at your sleeping bag. The guidance from the Park Service and from state wildlife agencies is consistent about the shape of it, even when the distances vary by place. Keep 3 separate zones, where you sleep, where you cook, and where the food is stored, all apart from each other, with the sleeping area upwind of the other 2 if the ground lets you. A common minimum is 100 yards between where you sleep and where the food is, though plenty of agencies use 100 feet in less serious country, and the local rules always win. In a developed campground, the food goes in a bear box or a hard-sided vehicle. In the back country, it goes in a canister or it gets hung. And the hanging numbers most agencies use run 10 to 15 feet off the ground and at least 4 feet out from the trunk, because a bear will simply climb the tree and reach. Here's the part people get wrong even when they hang their food. Food is not just food. Toothpaste, deodorant, sunscreen, bug spray, lip balm, the wrapper in your jacket pocket, the pan you cooked in, the towel you wiped your hands on. All of it is scented. All of it goes with the food. And do not try to burn leftovers in the fire ring. A campfire is not hot enough to burn organic matter completely. So what you leave in there is half-cooked bait, sitting 20 feet from your tent. And the reason this matters isn't only your safety. A bear that gets a meal out of a campsite comes back, and it stops being afraid, and it becomes a bear that has to be relocated or destroyed. That is what the wildlife people mean when they say a fed bear is a dead bear. Your sloppy camp is the thing that kills it. The old camps did this without a rule book. The kitchen fire, the drying racks, and the meat caches sat away from where people slept, up on scaffolds, out of reach, because everybody understood they were living in the same country as everything else that eats. That's 8. And that's 8 times now. The answer has started with looking at something before building anything, which is the thread I told you to watch for. 2 more, and I'll pull it. The last 2 are about time and about what you leave behind. And the 9th one causes more bad nights than any single piece of gear. Number 9. You're making camp in the dark. You wanted to squeeze another hour out of the drive, or another hour out of the hunt, or you figured setting up doesn't take long. So you're pulling into the side at last light. And now everything you do costs you triple. You can't read the ground, so you can't see the low spot or the dead limb overhead. You pitch on whatever's under the headlights. You gather wood by feel, which means you gather wet wood, you cook late, you eat late, and you get in the bag tired, wet, and cold. The Forest Service gives one piece of advice on this that I think is the single most useful sentence in their whole backcountry safety sheet. Make camp while you still have a reserve of energy, and they explain why. Exposure cuts your normal endurance, and when exhaustion forces you to stop, your body's heat production drops by half or more right then. You can go from tired to shivering hard in minutes, which means the decision that keeps you warm at midnight is the one you made at 3 in the afternoon. So set yourself a turnaround time and keep it like it's a rule somebody else made. 3 o'clock is a good one in the fall. At 3, you stop going forward and you start making camp, even if there's light left, even if the spot 2 miles on is better. Then you work in this order. Shelter up first, bed built second, insulation under you, wood gathered third, and gather twice what you think you need, because you'll burn it. Water fourth, food last, because food is the one thing that can happen in the dark without hurting you. One more thing on the wood, since it's the piece people short themselves on. Gather it standing, not off the ground. Dead branches still attached to a tree are dry all the way through, and the same branch lying in the leaves has been wicking moisture for a month. Snap test. If it snaps clean and sharp, it burns. If it bends, it steams. And get your tinder and your finger-thick kindling sorted into 3 piles before you light anything, because feeding a young fire in the dark with a handful of mixed sticks is how a fire dies. Do that, and dark arrives while you're sitting down with a cup of coffee instead of on your knees with a headlamp hunting through the truck for the steak bag. And that leaves the last one, which is the one that outlives you. Number 10. You left a fire that only looked out. You poured the last of the water jug over it. It stopped smoking. The flames were gone an hour ago. You kicked some dirt over the top, loaded the truck, and drove out feeling like a responsible person. And underneath that gray ash, there's a bed of coals still hot enough to start a fire, insulated by the very dirt you kicked on it, and it can sit there quietly for a day or more, waiting for wind. The Forest Service does not soften this. 9 out of every 10 wildfires in this country are human-caused, and one of the most common causes is exactly what I just described. A campfire somebody was sure was out. 9 out of 10, and the great bulk of those are people driving away from a ring they had already decided was safe. So here's the method, and it has 4 steps, and you do not get to skip one. Drown it, stir it, drown it again, then feel it. Drown means real water. Pour it on until the hissing stops completely, not a splash. Stir means you get a stick or a shovel in there and turn the whole bed over, breaking up the chunks, scraping the sides of the ring, because the coals that survive are the ones sitting under other coals. Drown again on what you just turned up, because you exposed dry, hot material that the first pour never touched. And then feel, back of your hand, held just above the ash and then down into it. If it's warm, you're not done. If it is too hot to touch, it is too hot to leave. Repeat the whole thing until that ash is cold, and I mean cold, the temperature of the ground next to it. 2 more things while you're at it. Don't use dirt as a substitute for water, because dirt insulates coals rather than killing them, which is the opposite of what you want. And don't haul firewood in from home across the state, because the insects and diseases that kill trees ride inside it. Buy it or gather it near where you burn it. Now, the older ethic went past putting the fire out, and this is the part I want to leave you with. In a camp that gets used season after season by people who will be back, you don't take more wood than you need, you don't foul the water, you scatter what you disturbed, and you leave the ground able to recover before the next person gets there. Not because a ranger is coming, because somebody is coming. That's what those rules are, every one of them. Instructions from people who assumed they would be back, and that their grandchildren would be back, written for a world where you could not move somewhere else. So that's the 10. And now I'll tell you the one underneath all of them, the one I asked you to watch for. Go back through the list and look at what the fix actually was every time. The stake goes in at an angle because of which way the load pulls. The site gets chosen off the drainage because of where water has run before. The pad goes under you because of how conduction works. The reflector goes behind the fire because of how radiant heat travels. The vents come open because of where moisture goes. The layers come off before the sweat starts. The water gets boiled because of what lives in it. The kitchen moves away from the bed because of what a bear smells. The camp goes up at 3 because of what exhaustion does to your body heat. The fire gets drowned and stirred and drowned again because of how coals hold heat under ash. There isn't a single product in that list. Every one of those fixes started with somebody reading the place they were standing in. You read the ground, the wind, the water, and the season first, and then you build the camp out of what you read. That's what the old shelters were. That tilted cone with the steeper wall to the weather and the doorway to the morning sun was not a shape somebody liked. It was a reading of the plains built in hide. The liner that turned a lodge into a chimney was a reading of what smoke and cold air do in an enclosed space. The bough bed was a reading of conduction, worked out long before anybody had a word for conduction. Those people had one shot at getting it right and no store to fix it at, so they read the country first and then built to what they found. Your gear is genuinely better than theirs. Lighter, tougher, drier, warmer for the weight, and I would not trade a good rain shell for a hide robe. But good gear whispers something dangerous, which is that you can skip the reading because the gear will cover for you. It covers for you 9 trips out of 10. The 10th trip is the one that matters, and on the 10th trip, the only person sleeping dry is the one who read the ground before the tent came out of the bag. So do the reading. Stand there a minute before you unroll anything. Look up at the limbs, look down at the channel, feel which way the air is moving, find where the sun comes up, then set your camp to what you found. And every one of these 10 mistakes takes care of itself. And that's one page out of a book called The Native American Way. 101 remedies, skills, and recipes that kept my people alive for 10,000 years, all of it written down plain. Now go ahead and grab your phone and open up your camera and point it at that square code on your screen and hold it steady for a second. A little link will pop up. Give it a tap and it will take you straight to the book. And if you are watching on your phone right now, the link is waiting for you right down below in the description. Now, if you enjoyed this video, you will enjoy the video right now on screen even more. I can assure you on that. Click it right now, my friend.